Europe feels like a living map, its borders and alliances shifting not over centuries, but in the span of a single news cycle. For decades, we grew accustomed to a certain kind of stability, a predictable order built on treaties and trade. This era is over. Crisis after crisis has washed over the continent, each one leaving the European Union a little more battered, a little more changed. Yet, within this relentless storm, there is a strange and valuable gift. Each crisis forces a moment of reckoning. It strips away the comfortable illusions and diplomatic niceties, compelling us to see the Union for what it truly is and what it must become. This is the difficult, painful journey from crisis to clarity. This journey matters profoundly, and it matters now. At its most basic, the European Union is a political and economic partnership of 27 countries. It is a club with a detailed rulebook born from the ashes of a continent that had twice torn itself apart. The founding idea was almost shockingly ambitious to bind the historical enemies of France and Germany together, first through coal and steel, that another war between them would be not just unthinkable, but materially impossible. This core principle, replacing the logic of conflict with the logic of cooperation, remains the EU's spiritual foundation. Over the decades, this project grew, absorbing new members from the south after their dictatorships fell, and then, most dramatically, from the east after the Iron Curtain crumbled. But the EU is more than just a peace project or a free trade zone. It is a unique experiment in shared sovereignty. When you travel across much of the continent, the absence of border posts is a tangible result of the Schengen Agreement. The euro coins in your pocket, used seamlessly from Lisbon to Helsinki, are a product of monetary union. Less obviously, the consumer rights that protect you when a flight is cancelled, or the environmental regulations that have reduced acid rain, are often born in Brussels. The EU shapes the world of the farmer receiving subsidies, the scientist getting research grants, and the small business owner navigating the single market. It is a constant humming presence in the background of daily life. Because it is so deeply woven into the fabric of society, the EU is not a distant entity that can have a problem in isolation. When the Union faces a crisis, it is the citizens who feel the tremors. A flaw in the architecture of the single currency can lead to a young person losing their job in Madrid. A disagreement over asylum policy can lead to a humanitarian disaster on a Greek island. A challenge to the rule of law in one member state can erode the democratic foundations of the entire bloc. That is why the grand, abstract debates in Brussels matter. They are ultimately arguments about our collective future, our security, and the kind of society we want to live in. So, yeah, it's complicated. The euro is the most ambitious and visible symbol of European integration. It was meant to be the final rivet in the structure of the single market, a tool to foster trade, and a powerful emblem of a shared European identity. For its first decade, it seemed to work like a charm. But this shared currency was built on a perilous fault line. It united disparate economies, the industrial might of Germany, the tourist-driven economies of the Mediterranean, under a single monetary policy, but without a corresponding political or fiscal union. It was like putting a dozen different families in the same house and giving them a shared credit card, but with no one in charge of the household budget. The reckoning came after the global financial crash of 2008. The music stopped. Countries like Greece, Ireland, Portugal, and Spain, after years of cheap credit, faced unpayable mountains of debt. Without their own currencies, they could not devalue. They were trapped. The crisis was brutal and divisive. A frugal North versus an indebted South. Bailouts and austerity, the Troika becoming a symbol of lost sovereignty. Populists rising on left and right. The ghost lingers. Reforms patch the flaws. Banking union, common borrowing during COVID, but deeper fiscal integration remains a political third rail. In 2015, over 1 million people headed to Europe. This was not a wave. It was a tide of individual human beings, each with a name and a story. Think of Mehmet, a father from Aleppo. He sold everything, boarded a flimsy dinghy, crossed a dark Aegean. his child's life jacket the only assurance, fleeing barrel bombs, not chasing better wages. Europe was unprepared. The Dublin system crushed frontline states. Camps grew squalid, solidarity frayed, fences rose, politics turned toxic. Borders remain a wound. External fixes cannot solve an internal divide. The European Union is more than a market. It is a community of values: human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law. That assumption felt secure, until it wasn't. Within member states, some elected governments began hollowing out democratic checks from the inside. Step by step, capture the media, stack the courts, constrain NGOs and universities, redraw electoral rules, autocratic legalism without a coup. The facade remains, but the structure is weakened. The EU faces a dilemma. How does a club of rules work when members break them? Tools exist: legal actions, Article 7, linking funds to rule of law. But politics slows and shields. A values crisis erodes the Union's very foundation. On February 24, 2022, Europe awoke to a nightmare it thought exiled. Russia's full-scale invasion was a brutal assault on the post-Cold War order. Peace is not permanent. It must be defended. Shock forged unity. Unprecedented sanctions, weapons and aid, common budget funding, lethal equipment opened doors for millions of refugees. Decades of energy dependence became a weapon against Europe. Governments scrambled for alternatives, cushioned households, accelerated renewables, for strategy as much as climate. Security leapt to the top of the agenda. Strategic autonomy turned urgent. EU-NATO coordination deepened. The shadow of war forced Europe to grow up fast. Economic power alone cannot keep you safe. If the EU cannot defend democracy at home, it loses moral authority abroad and risks becoming merely transactional. Authoritarian models will fill any vacuum left at Europe's doorstep. The battle for the rule of law in Europe's capitals is a battle for the soul of Europe itself. To understand Europe's crises, you must understand the strange machine designed to manage them. Not a federal state, not a simple international club. Power flows through Commission, Parliament, and Council. Proposal, co-decision, direction. The design builds consensus. In normal times, it works. In crises, it can feel painfully slow. 27 domestic politics and vetoes can gridlock foreign policy and taxation. Yet crisis forces innovation. Financial backstops, banking union, novel military support tools. The EU works when leaders share the problem and the will to solve it. Europe is lost in a dark wood. Standing still is not an option. 3 clear steps: money, people, values. Complete economic and monetary union with predictable, permanent shock absorbers, a common budget or safe asset. Not charity, but smart insurance. Forge a humane, orderly asylum system with shared responsibility, faster decisions, legal pathways that undercut smugglers and serve an aging economy. Defend democracy robustly, enforce conditionality, support independent media, civil society, and embattled judiciaries. The litany is overwhelming, but the EU was forged in crisis. It learns, it adapts, it holds. When stakes rise, unity follows. Collective borrowing, decisive action on war. The greatest threat is not a foreign army, but our own apathy and cynicism. Read, argue, vote, hold leaders accountable for choices made in our name. Choose clarity over fear. The next chapter can still be resilience and renewal.